filming in the Mount Charleston mountain wilderness, and I found this rose randomly, so good luck, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, today's topic is a question that I get asked fairly often, and it's basically, what do you do when you're in a training slump? What do you do when you lack motivation, when you just have those bad training days? And it's important to know that this will happen. To some degree, if it hasn't happened, you haven't reached that high of a level yet, because you will plateau. You are going to have good and bad days. But it's important to know that there's a lot of options to continue training in a different way during those bad days, to keep you interested, to keep you motivated. And what I'm going to talk about is pertaining more towards hand balancing, but of course these are concepts, so you can apply them to any discipline that you want. But yeah, what do you do when you're in a slump, when you lack motivation? So option one, suck it up, keep going. Did you think it was going to be easy? It's not. It's not easy. It takes work, and it's going to test your consistency and your dedication to the practice. And the reality of specifically the handstand practice, but it's the same with a lot of other disciplines, is that sometimes you just haven't done enough of the same thing that you've been doing. I think sometimes people expect progress to happen too soon. Like, okay, I've done a few of these, so when can I move on to the next thing? No, you can't move on yet because you haven't done enough. You haven't done enough to really understand it within your body. And again, hand balancing very specifically, a lot of the nature of the training, especially once we get more advanced, is you might get stuck doing the same couple drills for months at a time, and you have to be okay with that because you have to slowly expose yourself to these new sensations that you're developing. And one-arm handstand, I think, is probably the best example of this because it's so easy. You just want to lift the arm, but if you lift the arm, you're not helping yourself. You're not developing that specific feeling of what it's like to balance yourself. So there's a good chance you're going to have to spend a long time just doing shifts and hold to the fingertips and being patient and not lifting. And you can't be expecting progress to happen instantaneously. Sometimes you just have to suck it up and keep doing the same thing that you've been doing. And I know that's like, it's not the answer that you want to hear from a teacher, right? You want to hear that, oh no, what's that one tip? I need to do this one tip that's going to help me get better and it's going to unlock this achievement. Like, sometimes yes, but sometimes to get that tip, you have to already have done the work previously, and to do the work, it can be monotonous. You just have to do the same thing and keep going. So if you lack motivation, you're in a plateau, that's okay. You might just have to suck it up and continue. Next idea is, don't take things so seriously. I think people put too high of an expectation on their training, and that's why they get demotivated and disappointed, because why are you putting this expectation on yourself in the first place? Like, are you entering the handstand Olympics? I don't know. I don't think that exists yet. So, okay, if you are a high-level gymnast, then yes, you need to take your handstand more seriously because that's a part of your sport. If you are a circus acrobat that specializes in hand balancing, then yes, you can take it a little bit more seriously. But I think most of the people right now that are training handstand are just enthusiasts looking to get better, looking to add it into their own physical practice. So within that sense, understand that it's going to take a long time, so there's no overnight progress. And you don't have to take it that seriously, because if you don't get it, like if you don't get the handstand or whatever skill you're working on in the amount of time that you've allotted, it's okay. Like nothing happened. There's no consequences, right? So lighten up a little bit. You don't have to take it that seriously. And you can learn a lot from the failure. You can learn a lot more from the process than from the end result. I know that's a bit of a cliche these days, but it's true. So yeah, you don't have to take your training that seriously unless your living specifically depends on your handstand performance, and being a handstand coach that does online training, which is the popular thing these days, that doesn't count. That's still, sorry guys, that still doesn't give you the right to take yourself so seriously. If you're in a slump and demotivated, another thing you can always do, even if you're not in a slump, is just go back to your basics. Basics are different for everybody of different levels, of course, right? Like, a 5-second one-arm handstand might be somebody's like final ultimate goal, but that might be barely somebody else's warm-up. That might be their basics. So what I would define as basics is the skills you can already do. So learn how to do them better, right? Fix your aesthetic, make your line better if you want to. For technique, make your balance less wobbly, make it take less effort, hold it longer. What about your kick-ups, right? Your entries. You know, like when I teach classes, I end up having to spend, I don't have to, but I like to. I spend more time working on the handstand entries, sometimes the actual handstand, because what happens is somebody says, oh, I can hold it 30 seconds. But it takes them 5 tries to get that 30-second hold. So that's a really simple thing you can work on, is just the consistency of your entry, just the efficiency of your basic holds. Even something simple like endurance on the wall, like stuff that you don't have to overly exert yourself to do, you can already do it, so it's going to maybe give you a little bit more confidence compared to maybe you're failing quite often the stuff that's demotivating you. And sometimes you can get a whole new perspective on the practice by really just going back and refining the basics to a high level. And honestly, like, I don't care how good you are, how high of a level you are, there's still always a good chance that your basics can be better. Of course, if you only work basics, at some point you have to move on to improve. But if you're in a slump, if you're demotivated, you've hit a plateau, it's a good opportunity sometimes to take a step back and see where your basics are at. And who knows, maybe they're not as good as you thought they were. And maybe by going back and reinforcing those basics, it will allow you to take another step forward into your progress. Another thing you can do is focus work on developing your physical attributes. So what I would define that as things that will help you be better at the skills potentially, but not working on the skills themselves. So for handstand, flexibility is an important factor, right? So maybe you stretch a little bit in your warm-up in between sets, but maybe because you're spending so much time in the handstand, you're not really improving your flexibility much by doing that, you're just maintaining it. So maybe if you're in a slump, it's a good chance to actually take time and work on your straddle, your pancake, your splits, your shoulders, your back. All the stuff that maybe you do here and there, but that you can now focus on improving because you've switched your focus. And by improving this flexibility, this mobility, it's going to give you access to maybe better aesthetics in your handstand. Maybe it's going to help with skills like your press, like your Mexican handstand, your one arm, whatever you're working on. So that's definitely a good option to have, is work on your physical attributes. Maybe strength is another one. Maybe instead of working so much technique, you take a bit of time to work on strength, conditioning, endurance, like all this stuff that it's not directly what you're training to progress in your handstand, but all of that is going to help. So that kind of goes back into basics, but I would separate the categories of basics and physical attributes. But yeah, you're in a slump, you lack motivation, maybe like you did a few handstands that day and you're just having a really shitty handstand session. So don't do any handstands, right? Just spend time working on your flexibility. And then maybe it's going to give you a new perspective on developing that flexibility, and then maybe you're going to spend more time on that, and then in turn, in the future, it's going to help make your handstands look and perform better. So again, it's just an option of another thing that you can do. Play around, especially because a lot of people are very into that sets and reps mentality, like this is what I have to work on, I have to do this for this many. And it is a good mentality to have, because to some degree you do have to do that systematic work to build the physical capacity, to build the skills, but don't be afraid to play around. And this goes with kind of not taking the practice so seriously, but just pick a move that's related and try it, and just spend the session messing around with that move, right? Maybe it's a move you can't do yet, but you can try safely. Yeah, play around with it. Or honestly, just don't set an expectation. Just go up into your handstand and flail your legs around and see if you can balance. Work different positions, work some of those kind of inorganic movements that you wouldn't see in the sets and reps, and you might discover something new. You might have fun a little bit. And the good thing about playing is that you can't get disappointed if you fail, because you weren't really trying to do anything in the first place. You were just experimenting. And again, I think this is really important alongside to complement the systematic work that you're doing, because this is where you kind of develop your own personal style, is you play around and you see what works for you and you see what doesn't work for you. And if your practice is only playing, you may not build enough capacity to really be able to improve. But if you do only the systematic work, I feel like your movements and your practice might be too mechanical, and I like to have this organic component of just, in this case, I would define play as try something with no expectation, that you're not sure if it's going to work or not, but you want to try it just to see what happens. And if it doesn't work, try something different. And that's something you can definitely add to your practice every once in a while to keep motivation, to keep things interesting and to keep it fun, because ultimately, hopefully, you're training because you enjoy the practice. So it's another way to add kind of just a fun element. Another option is to branch off into kind of horizontal progressions versus vertical progressions. So vertical progression would be the skill that's harder. So you have your basic handstand, then the press handstand would be something more difficult, and then eventually we get into one arm and all this other stuff. So those are vertical progressions, but you can also do horizontal progressions. So you can branch out into skills that are similar, that utilize similar concepts, but they're not necessarily more difficult. They're just different variations. So a good example of this is maybe your main handstand practice is just static hold. You do a lot of static, you do some leg position, you do some entry work. So maybe play with walking. Like walking on your hands, it's a different kind of balance, but I do feel that there's a lot of carryover, and sometimes it's more fun, sometimes it's more interesting to work on, and it is actually preparing you for later skills like one-arm handstands as well. So that's just a good example, is do a skill that's similar, that's kind of related to your current practice, but it's different enough that it's going to keep you interested and motivated through those times that you're working on a slump. Or working through a slump. So two really good examples here. Like I said, practice handstand walks. The good thing about handstand walks also, it's really easy to mark your progress. You can just count your steps. Or cartwheels, like play around with slow cartwheels, different kind of cartwheel variations. Cartwheel where you pause on one hand and go to the other one. Cartwheel switching directions. And you can make even a cartwheel into a handstand practice if you put enough variations on it. So these are just examples, but the point is that you can do a similar skill and work on that. And if you're having one of those bad days, it's going to give you kind of that spark of, oh, I'm working something new and it's different, and it's still helping me with my practice. Or another example, a little bit more advanced, you can work jumping on the hands. So again, if you're a bit more advanced with your handstand balance, but you're just not having a good day, you can work and play with handstand hops, because it's a more advanced skill, and it's still going to help to give you a better perspective. It's going to build more versatility. So just examples, but do something similar but different enough that you feel like it's a novel approach, and it gives you a stimulation that maybe you haven't had through the monotony of your practice. So real talk, and this is something that probably your coach or your trainer isn't going to tell you because you pay them, but take some time off. It's okay. Like, handstand is such a long term, and it's not only handstands, it's any skill. Like, if you're really interested in developing it, you're going to have to do it for years. That's how any skill works if you really want to take it to a level of high proficiency and skill and mastery. So if you take a few weeks or a couple months off over years of practice, it's not going to matter that much. It's not going to have that much impact. So don't be afraid to take a step back. Don't train something completely different. And then when you come back to the skill, you can have a newfound respect and a newfound perspective on what that means to you and why you're doing it in the first place. So yeah, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to step back and take time off. Yeah, you're going to be a little bit rusty coming back. That's how it works. But I find that, and I think you'll find that you'll retain the skills more than you thought you would. It's going to come back faster, and it's going to give you a newfound motivation and excitement and respect to work on that skill. So yeah, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to take time off. It's okay, as long as you need to, and then come back. And then one more thing you can and should do for training motivation, getting out of a slump, is train with other people. If you can, find a community go to a class, go to a workshop, just so you have this group energy. And I say this, and I don't do it enough because I'm more of a loner type, but it will help, especially during those times that you feel like your practice has stagnated. Yeah, go take somebody's class, and maybe they're gonna tell you one of these things that I already said, or they're just gonna make you do something different, or see it in a different way, and that's gonna cause a spark of motivation. Or, just jam, just training, even if you don't make any kind of interaction with other people, just this idea of training around other people, because there is something to be said about group energy, about people with similar interests in a room working on the same thing. So if you can, if you're able to, like if most of your training is alone, I think it is valuable at least once in a while to spend some time training, not necessarily under, but just with, around other people, because that's going to help give you, again, another perspective on the training, and it's going to give you other people's perspective on the training. So something else to keep in mind. So anyway, this isn't any kind of universal exhaustive list of what to do when you lose training motivation for handstands, but I do think it's very helpful, and hopefully it gives you some ideas of just how to put more variety into your training so you develop a wider perspective, more versatility, and then you keep your motivation up longer because you're working a lot of different elements, different angles of the same skill set. But of course, you're gonna have to grind. Sometimes you're gonna have to take some time off. Sometimes you're gonna have to go back to basics. And it's the reality of all of it. But it's good to have different strategies on those days, or sometimes it's going to be days where you don't feel it, sometimes it's going to be longer, sometimes you're going to have a week or a whole month where you feel off, and I've had those. So don't worry, keep at it, do something different, change your perspective, and if you enjoy the training, you're going to keep it up. So hopefully you can continue and get better and learn more. So let me know what other YouTube videos you'd like to see. Check out my upcoming workshops. Those are going to be included below. Check out my handstand ebook. Check out my Vimeo. I have an online training group that I run where we work different topics every month. So different ways to support me and learn more about my approach if you want. But otherwise, yeah, I'll see you next time I do another YouTube video.